Thank you, Craig. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, friends and fellows of the German Marshall Fund, thank you very much for the invitation tonight and accepting me as Plan B. Due to the fact that just a schedule change in the Ministry of Finance which makes Wolfgang Schäuble impossible to show up here is one of the minor damages we have in those days where everybody is challenged by the financial and overall European crisis, at least if I believe in the papers. I'm asked to give you some notes on the European issues and transatlantic relationship, and I'm very glad that a friend of Germany and an outstanding person is among us, and I would say hi to Phil Murphy, who is one of the outstanding ambassadors to Germany, and I very much appreciate his work for our country and our relationship. And I want to name two other persons whom show that this is a very important meeting. Chancellor Merkel has sent his minister, or her minister, I have to say, Ecki von Kleden. Welcome, Ecki. Who's absolutely is engaged in transatlantic relationship, and that you get, if you are a participant of a program, you get something out of it. And one outstanding person is now Secretary of State with our President, David Gill, and I want to say that he's one of the GMF guys we have to praise. With the change of speaker, you have a change of perspective. Wolfgang Schäuble would have given you a completely different address than I'm. He is going to be 70 this year, and now that I present you the transatlantic perspective of a baby boomer, and which probably has taken a completely different political socialization than Wolfgang Schäuble, who belongs to the Wirtschaftswunder generation. And I was member of the political engagement, especially when the Cold War was very hot during the 80s and was dominating. That was gorgeous time when not financial but political issues were dominating the debate. When the Cold War during the 80s, everybody was talking about the Russian SS-20 and the Western reaction. I think not everybody will share my conclusion, but it was a very public debate. And on the transatlantic perspective, probably Schäuble will have talked about the Kennedy speech, Ich bin ein Berliner. My positive and very engaging impression was in 1987, when Ronald Reagan was giving his famous speech just in front of the Brandenburg Gate, where he talked about the idea of freedom. And it was quite interesting, very remarkable, that the famous quote out of this speech, which sounds like, "Mr. Gorbachev, please tear down this wall," was not in the official version of the speech, but it was the personal wish of Ronald Reagan to put this very issue, to tear down the wall, on the international agenda. And 2 years later, the wall fell down. What a success of American leadership. Congratulations to you guys. And I wouldn't say this is the one and only speech which delivers the breakdown of the wall, but European reunification and German reunification has not only just to do with European integration, where Willy Brandt was one of those who prepared it, especially with a focus on Eastern Europe, and gave Helmut Kohl at those days the chance to fulfill it. It was just an issue actually of political support for Germany and realizing that there's a special relationship between the United States of America and the Federal Republic of Germany at those days. This shows me that we had true allies and true friends, not only in Washington, D.C., but in the whole country in the United States. Today, more than 20 years later, we live in a completely new international framework. The traditional forms of transatlantic partnerships and partnership is challenged by how our technicians and analysts describe it as a polycentric, interconnected order of independent citizens. Actually, to describe it in my words, the world has completely changed, and a new framework is challenging us. We as a Europeans have been, I wouldn't say surprised, but we're challenged by this change of the world order in those days, very, very intense. And we as Germans and Europeans can contribute to re-establish, for example, a strong, united economic, political union in Europe as a contribution for re-establishing a transatlantic dialogue. This is what the German Marshall Fund is focusing on its 40th anniversary. This is a work in progress and probably will not be fulfilled within the next 10 days. Probably will take a decade and probably will be a work in progress for the next political decision process. But our transatlantic partners are somehow irritated how complicated we as Europeans behave in those days. Nobody seems to understand how complicated things are to be decided in Brussels or in the national parliaments and institutions. But to summarize this, it's still the old story, not just since those Reagan days. It's the idea of freedom as the basic of the European Union. It's the rule of law that Pope Benedict just quoted in the German Bundestag, based on Roman institutions, Greek philosophy, and Christian Jewish civilizations, which is the foundation of the European integration. Europe is not just an economic project. It's a political project, and therefore I see that the transatlantic dialogue is not based on economic exchange with worthwhile to intensify, but it's based on a common understanding on distinguished values which we actually share on both sides of the Atlantic. And the German Marshall Fund of the United States, which is commemorating its 40th anniversary with this dinner tonight, is an excellent framework for the new challenges of the transatlantic dialogue and has revealed its innovative power when fighting for the East European expansion, which we realized over the last years, which probably Willy Brandt will have loved intensively. Latest polls raised by the German Marshall Fund show that there is a shift of interest among the American public. Asia seems to be very hip, and Europe seems to be a bit more minor. But I would contradict, not being rude, and I see many in America who contradict too. Otherwise, it would not have happened that Chancellor Merkel was receiving the Medal of Freedom just 1 year ago, commemorating not only just the German-American relationship, but the common values of European and transatlantic ideas in the White House. This is something we should work on and focus on, and what we have achieved over the last 40 years has to be fought and achieved again the next decades. And therefore actually very much praise what we would probably call the network in new language, the network the German Marshall Fund has achieved over the last decade. And I see many of you have been contributing to this network activities, who know what they get out of it, and whom I invite to invest in the future to make this very efficient network more profitable and more transatlantic as it has ever been before. If the German Marshall Fund hasn't been invented 40 years ago by Willy Brandt and his colleagues, it has to be invented in those days because it's necessary to intensify transatlantic dialogue. But this force of dialogue, this force of freedom, doesn't work without characters, personalities who can be identified with the mission statement. And I want to close up praising the virtues and achievements of one member of the board of the German Marshall Fund. Guido Goldman, he was one of the founding fathers of these networks. And in politics, where we usually want to stay long but sometimes are thrown out too early, we're a bit surprised when we read that 40 years of co-chairing the board of the German Marshall Fund has been achieved by Guido. This is an extraordinary contribution, not only to the institutions of the German Marshall Funds of the United States of America, but it's an extraordinary contribution to mutual understanding. And not only behalf of the German government, but probably on behalf of everybody, I would like to invite you, stand up and keep your glasses and have a toast on Guido Goldman representing this gorgeous transatlantic values. To your health. Thank you very much indeed, ladies and gentlemen.